saucer investigation groups since the early 60s. He is one of the founders of both NU4 in 1988 and U4 New South Wales in 1991, two of the sponsors of this seminar. He is currently the director, or president if you will, of the UFO Research New South Wales group, and also the editor of the magazine The UFO Reporter. He has a special interest in UFO abduction cases and is currently producing a book on the 1909 airships seen over New Zealand and Australia, which he will talk about today. Unfortunately, though, there's just not enough of him to go around. He's a good candidate for cloning, and we're very happy to have most of them here today. Would you please give a hearty welcome to an inspiring and dedicated individual, Brian Dick.
Wow. Thank you very much. I'm not quite sure what to say. I've actually had quite a long interest in the airships of 1909. In fact, I think I collected my first account, a newspaper account, about 32 years ago. I just realised that a couple of days ago. So, but the thing is, no one has really asked me to talk about them except in the last couple of years, and I said that I was thinking of writing a book. And particularly, I got together with a gentleman called Peter Fleury, who's now back in New Zealand, in Dunedin, and we've been combining our information, trying to come up with some really good material. There's some brilliant material, and I hope to show you some of that here this afternoon. First of all, can I have the first slide, please? Okay, for those of you who don't know, this is New Zealand. Basically, the main area for 1909, there are a series of Zeppelin-like craft seen over New Zealand and in Australia, particularly centred around this area in Dunedin, slightly south and to the west of it, which at this time of the year, at that time of the year too, was pretty cold. As you can imagine now, I want to particularly just dwell on the early material, the stuff that comes from the very first site that was recorded, why the whole thing sort of really got out of control, as it were, and became New Zealand's biggest ever UFO flat. And then look at some of the more interesting Australian material that Peter and I have been particularly coming up with in the last few years. It's a lot harder to get, unfortunately. Now, first of all, I'd like to show you a map of one. Okay, this area of Dunedin itself is up about here on this map. Now, what happened essentially was that on the 11th of July, 1909, a number of people were seeing some friends of that railway station. Focus on it here. Over here at a place called Stirling. Looking across, they noticed this unusual series of lights over the Kaitangata Hills, out over the area known as Wongaloa. Now this is only about 10-15 kilometres away. They watched for about half an hour. They saw their friend up on the train, I believe, and then one of the men sort of started walking back home. He was then watched this aircraft. The lights then reappeared again, and they seemed to sort of come in, circle over, and then follow him and go up inland, where they disappeared in what he said was the direction of the mountains. Now I'll just switch to another map here. Once again, here we have the Wongaloa Hills, and the thing to particularly notice here is the Clutha River. The Clutha is a very large, very dynamic river with a lot of water in it. It appears that the airship, as it's called then, moved up the Clutha River until it came to a bunch of hills. They're certainly mountains by Australian standards, but really a little bit more than hills by New Zealand standards. And it was just seen disappearing in this direction. No one quite knew what happened to it. Nothing much more happened in the next couple of weeks until all of a sudden this little township, this red dot here, basically Kelso, started to report a series of very, very unusual phenomena. These were daylight sightings. Now, could I please have the next map? This is the township of Kelso as it never was. Basically, this is a plan for the town as it was designed to be in 1875. It's at the conjunction of two floods are like. It's used by the October lakes. And the result is that every now and then it gets a really dramatic flood that occurs in this area. In fact, it's so dramatic that about 15 years ago, the township had to be done away with, had a series of 100-year floods within about 4 or 5 years. And they had so many, in fact, that they decided to abandon the site. All the houses are carved away. The township of Kelso just doesn't exist anymore, which is really well sad. In 1909, the settlement became very much the centre of attention in New Zealand. The account that you've probably seen most of, next slide please, is from an account that comes in the Otago Daily Times, a local newspaper that comes out of a very well considered newspaper. Now basically, a radar sighting, this aircraft, this airship seemed to come out from the area to the west, so to the east of Kelso itself, circle over the town, and then head back to where they come back to the mountains. From say, people come out from here, and they're over the town, and children watch the midnight day or thereabouts, and back to their mountains. There's also the far one woman, Mrs. Russell. This is what the right in the stories as far as most people take them. But the Otago Daily Times also put out a weekly newspaper called the Otago Witness. And I avoided actually looking at this particular publication for a number of years because I thought that they were such a religious one. Next slide, please. Then someone said, have you tried it with the Otago Witness because it didn't use photographs? And suddenly, here's a photograph of Mrs. Russell, a person that confirmed what the children had seen, and with her family. And I in fact have seen another photograph. This is actually taken from a book called History of Kelso, written by a local historian, Mrs. Brownlee. And I think it's wrong yet, but I think we've had some children along here by some of the same children who produced the diagrams that we've just seen before. Next slide, please. The other interesting photograph that appears about the same publication is this. It shows the area where it was actually taken. Now, where it was actually sighted. Now, this, to the east of Kelso itself, there's a little hill they call the Wooded Hill. Nowadays, it's just covered with gorse and scrub. In those days, it was probably pretty daring as well. The trees were chopped down, but on this particular day, about I think it's the 26th of July, at lunchtime, the kids are being sort of schooled out at Rock. The township's only a couple of miles long. The children are being let out of school, probably to go home for lunch, and a number of them reported this object just after 12 o'clock. So they come out from behind the wood hill, here, turn around, and go back. And there's a couple of numbers here to indicate what major witnesses were. This indicates that, in fact, they were probably less than 100 meters from the actual object itself. So, had a quick look at the actual pictures that the children had produced. Recently, we've been having a look at how big the picture was. It's quite important when you get into the buildings. It definitely wasn't, for example, this is probably our first attempt of the Kelso issue. In New Zealand, there are so many sightings around the Kelso area, which refer to as the Kelso issue. The colour is black, and I've included up in this corner here. This is an outline of the area just across the channel. One of the reasons why it suddenly became such a big issue was because the area had just crossed the English Channel. And the whole thing was treated as a huge success. Everyone was absolutely trying to predict some of the reports in the newspapers at the time were quite extended at long last. And then conquered the English Channel. It showed that the first time aeroplanes were distinct commercial possibilities in form of transport. They weren't just a transport. And it began to be very, very exciting. The other big development was going on at the same time was, of course, Zeppelin, counter-Zeppelin experimental airships. Now, I'll go into those in just a moment. And of course, airships were in fact seen in many ways as being actual successes or ways. This is still very old and this phrase being considered very much as playing around with toys. But the channel was sort of changing very, very quickly. In the meantime, we were still very much aware of the Kelso as I've said, this is our very first attempt to draw the airship. And I think when I, in the recent months I've been looking at it again and I'm not too happy with it. Have the next slide, please. But the main reason why we did this, we did this exercise, was Ken and I took a look at the size of the gas envelope, because that determines how much your balloon has got. If you presume, for example, this is hydrogen, you can sort of get an estimate of how much weight you can lift and how big this thing would have to be. Now, at the same time, we look at the most up-to-date aircraft in the world at the time. This is Zeppelin's L5, which later on became Zeppelin 2. This thing is absolutely massive. It is several hundred feet long. It's got over 500,000 cubic feet of gas and hydrogen mostly. These things are so big that you build them out over lakes for two reasons. First of all, a nice big flat surface to move it on. They built these floating hangars on lakes. The other reason was the lakes, of course, contain water. Hydrogen is very flammable. And by surrounding themselves with water, it's still less likely for hydrogen to catch on fire. You know, really dangerous stuff. This is 1909 high tech. The other high tech development, as I put it down here, is aerials and everything. Top speed, if I remember correctly, of about 40 miles an hour. Top speed of these balloons, because the Zeppelins is only about 30 miles an hour. By comparison, on the same scale, these are on the same scale, this is the size of the LCD. Now, I've been able to check this. Maybe it be smaller, but obviously this is reduces the electric capacity, reducing the size of the envelope. So if you're looking at something like this, this Kelso airship, it would still only have an effective lifting capacity of about 100 to 150 kilos, which is a lot. So it makes you start to wonder, perhaps, there's something else here that really wasn't a balloon. As I've said, I've recently tried to look at redrawing this because some of the drawings and some of the descriptions don't quite fit. There is a problem with this basic shape here, in that you don't have, and many will see this in things like barrage thin built on the back for stability. Now, in those days, people were still coming to terms with the language. Quite often, for example, they did refer to the propeller at the back, so those things like a wheel. Of course, if you think back to 1909 and what wheels are like, you had spoked carriage wheels. When they sort of are rolling along very fast, of course, the spokes tend to sort of, develop that special propeller-like look. And the children actually describe a wheel on the back spinning very quickly. This wheel figure is very common through so many of the accounts of the airships that were seen in New Zealand and Australia at the time. People saw reflections of this thing at the back. What I believe that instead had at the time of the airfit, I actually think that the gas bag was probably back up there. This is still sort of the bottom view, but the top, the side view would make this much flatter. You'd still have the gondola down the bottom. And from what I've seen, and other descriptions, what was often described as sails was in fact a kind of rudder. These kinds of rudders here were in fact used in some of the earlier French models of aircraft, of balloons, to give it stability, to stop it, so you can actually guide it as it went along, keep it on the straight and narrow and level. That would be the idea of these kinds of sails, or in this case, ailerons. The ailerons on this side, for example, or the stabilizing fins here, will keep it, so as you go along like that. These will sort of help keep it moving straight ahead. The problem about this particular design is from an aeronautical point of view, it's really not very stable. Given the New Zealand weather conditions, this is really rather dangerous. Really much better to go for the traditional, or what we now call the traditional garage design, with a fence sticking out the back. But I think that this particular one, once I've modified this and put on these other structures that were mentioned and provided in some drawings, then we have something which is much closer to the Kelso airship. Interestingly, it makes it like no other airship that has ever been designed, or will probably ever be designed, because of these structures here. So it all just adds interest to it. Now, the other interesting thing about the airships is that they're also seen in Australia. And really, this was an Australasian phenomenon. It wasn't just in New Zealand. The thing is that in New Zealand, okay, the distances were not as great as in Australia. You had a large number of newspapers which carried good accounts of local events. And it's quite noticeable that when you go through the literature and all the newspaper material, that when people are commenting on something a long way from them, they tend to sort of take in more of the myths, like there was accounts of people actually hearing voices coming from the aircraft, talking possibly in German or something like that, or French or some foreign tongue. When you actually go to the local newspapers where this was meant to have occurred, you don't get those details coming out. This is an embellishment that occurred later. And you tend to get more of these embellishments the further you are away from it. Now, it became obvious during Peter Fleury and my investigations that these are also seen in Victoria. We kind of thought at the time this was a copycat event. But there are certain accounts. This one is from the Otago Daily Times, for example. It refers to the Dandenongs, an area just southeast of Melbourne itself, where a reverend gentleman was staying for the weekend, and he and his neighbours watched a series of lights. Now, surprisingly enough, his account, which is one of the first accounts from this particular period in 1909, is very similar to the very first accounts we had from Wongalloa, Stirling, Balclutha, that sort of thing. It's surprisingly similar in many qualities to the lights that were seen at that time. It's also very similar to so many UFO accounts that UFO investigators like myself, come across today. Now, can I have the next map, please? So, in Australia, okay, fine. Dandenongs down here. Also seen people on a train, the Melbourne to Sydney Express around Hilltop and Picton. Was also reported. I watched it for quite some time. The parallels between this and the quality of the reporting for people who would not be aware of the actual what had been happening in New Zealand and aware of the details is very similar, for example, for something that was reported from the West Coast, where off the South Island of New Zealand, where a large number of people on a train going from Hokitika to Greymouth reported seeing this balloon light, this object out to sea, light bobbing up and down with a waving, undulating motion, very similar to what was seen at Hilltop. Okay, it was also, I have a report that comes from Zeehan in Tasmania. I'm having difficulty verifying that because, once again, local libraries in Australia don't always have very many copies of newspapers from other states. They don't always have very good copies of old newspapers. You really need to be in the area. The Zeehan account is alluded to by Sydney newspapers, but I cannot find any direct account of it. An account over here, the suburb, I think, Pingelly in Perth. A fairly sceptical account on the Western Australia about something that had been seen there. And later on, the latest account of one of which I find very interesting because it's actually a chance for Peter Fleury and myself to try and validate some of the working assumptions that we've been coming to by going through this material. It comes from the 25th of October, Onslow, up here in northwest Australia. Basically, I think this is a very, very, very good sighting. On October the 25th, Mrs. A.J. Rowe, wife of the manager of Minderoo Station near Onslow, was the first to spot the strange craft. It looked compact, like a dirigible balloon, a bit like the calcination I had previously shown. Mrs. Ross said, but it appeared to be squarer, more like an aeroplane. That might well explain the extra wings and things that it seemed to have on the ailerons. The sun shone on it and flashes came from it. That flashes came from is very similar to New Zealand accounts, where flashes of light were seen coming off the propeller or the wheel at the back, as though it reflected from something revolving or from metalwork. 3 station hands also saw the object, which the newspapers of the day described as a mystery airship. And one of them made a sketch of it. The Customs Collector of Onslow, Mr. Elsie Temperley, submitted a detailed report on the sighting to the Minister of Customs, who passed it on to the Defence Department. Mr. Temperley thought the object really was an airship. The work he suggests of an inventor who was experimenting, or perhaps from a foreign vessel anchored off the coast. This is one thing too that's extremely interesting as far as I'm concerned as a researcher. The comparison of the arguments that people made for what the object was at the time. It was obviously from an some sort of a ship off the coast, perhaps a German ship that's lost and gone astray. It was perhaps the work of some inventor. Now, Peter and I spent an awful lot of time investigating what local inventors were doing at the time. It certainly wasn't. It's also quite outside the technology that was available at the time. And this particular case, I really would like to pursue it if I can. It's very difficult. I presume we have to go to Perth to follow it up, to see if I can get a copy of the report that was made in 1909 to the Defence Department. Presumably that is still filed away somewhere. It would be a wonderful item to have to sort of verify many of the assumptions that we've been working on at this stage. Now, I'm afraid I had to give you a very, very quick tour of this. There's a heap of information available. There are lots of, a huge number of newspapers around, a significant number of them in Australia which have this material in it. And we really need to follow this up because it's a very, very interesting area. Nowadays, I think one of the things we've also got to look at is, could we do, what would it take for us to build a Kelso airship today? And obviously, we'd certainly go about it differently. We could probably build one, I think, that would work probably much better than the original, in fact, fairly cheaply for perhaps a few $1,000s. But in those days, when you look at the technology that was going on, the kind of advances that people were making in aircraft, you've got to look at this very, very seriously indeed. Now, while some academics have looked at this subject, the airships of 1909, they tend to see it as being a response to the arms build-up that was going on in the Northern Hemisphere just before World War I. And they sort of say that, this is people saying that this is the German scare down under. People were scared of the airships. But I would like to go back to the very, very first account that came through in New Zealand. And in fact, it's very similar in many respects to the same sort of accounts as when Louis Blériot through the channel. People were quite ecstatic that at long last someone had done something fantastic with airships. And in this particular case, I should point out too that some of the causes that were discussed was also Mars. Mars was fairly close to the Earth at this time. And this article, this Mars argument was actually revived in the 1950s, 1954 in New Zealand, as being another indication that Mars, close to the Earth in 1909, close to the Earth in 1954, was in fact the source of these objects. It was quite an elegant debate undertaken in New Zealand at the time. But finally, I'd like to end up with one of the very first accounts from the Belclutha Free Press. We can't find the original. Surprisingly enough, although there's a lot of newspaper material about, the Belclutha Free Press does not appear to be one of them, particularly for this period. There may be a copy of it somewhere in the Wellington archives, associated with Parliament. But the person who saw the object, their feeling was this: it was not one of fear of the Germans, it was that if that is the explanation that it was a local inventor, concluded our informant, the inventor has struck something that will knock Count Zeppelin and Wilbur Wright sideways. For as I gazed at that grand light sailing easily through space on Sunday night, I involuntarily ejaculated, "My, what would I not give to be on that ship?" It seemed to embody the very poetry of aerial motion. Now, to me, that is not so much the expression of despair as many historians would have you believe. It was really a sense of excitement that something was going on. The same sort of excitement that many UFO investigators find today when you first go out to talk to people who've had a UFO sighting. Now, I'll finish at that. Thank you very much. I would urge you, if you have an interest, to look up your own newspapers, your own local newspapers at the time in Australia, wherever you're from, particularly from West Australia. You may well find that there are very, very good accounts of airships or early UFOs in them for that period. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Today is a firm believer in the possibility and probability of other life in space. Lights up, please. She joined the Victorian UFO Research Society in 1958. She was invited to become president of this same research society in 1978. We are glad she could come here today to tell us more about a very unique and eye-opening close encounter experience, a classic case that is known throughout the worldwide UFO community. Please, welcome now Judy McGee.
That I was a firm believer in the probability of life in outer space. My belief in this came when I first joined the organisation in 1958, and I met the Reverend Gill and his friend Reverend Crutwell in 1959. They were in Melbourne at the time and they'd just come down after this experience. And as you can see there, in the lower part of the picture is Boynai, that's where the mission station was. There was a loud explosion one morning, one day, and they came out to see what had caused the explosion. There were 38 witnesses to an object which was only about 400 feet away from them. And it had 4 entities on it. 2 entities seemed to be working on the object, and then 2 would disappear, and then 2 more would come out, and on total there were 4 entities on the shelf all at one time. And this, of course, made me believe that this object certainly was not from this planet. It remained there from about 7:15 until 10:30 one evening, and during that period of time there were about 5 or 6 smaller circular objects which came from the clouds and seemed to take up position around the top of the object. And some of these smaller ones would float away and come back again over that period of time. At 10:30 they had all left. That's his sketch, or an artist's sketch of what Reverend Gill saw. So you can see the 2 entities there. He was very meticulous too about his documenting of the times of the object's appearance and the entity's appearance and disappearance. But thank you very much. So that is the Reverend Gill, who's pointing to where the mission station was. People usually describe objects as from the things that they can recognise, like the natives in New Guinea saying that these look like chili lights to them because they're up in the mountains where they were went, let alone any white man. And Alexander's armies were dispersed apparently on these 3 occasions by what they termed flying shields. And a shield, if you recall, has a dome in the middle of it where they hold it with their hand. Thank you. That's the last one, thank you. My discussion today is a close encounter with Maureen Puddy. Maureen Puddy's case came to my notice through radio, PAW in Melbourne. I don't listen to radio very often if I can help it. But on this occasion, some member rang me and said that there had been a lady speaking on the radio for about 3/4 of an hour at that stage, who had a close encounter with a UFO. And I spoke to Maureen, and I spoke to her for about an hour on the telephone, and I was intrigued by her report. And she promised to come and tell us about it at our general meeting, which she did. We had a full house there, which really surprised her, and the people overflowed out into the foyer. And she started out by saying that, although I say at the moment here, these encounters occurred in 1972, but were never written up in our publication until 1983, Review. And Maureen addressed one of our quarterly meetings in 1995 and was attentively accepted, to say the least. It has been said by some researchers who've never even met her that her case was an abduction. But to Paul Norman and myself, who investigated this one rather thoroughly, it was certainly not an abduction because we were there on the whole of the occasion, especially the third one. Her story began when her son was injured at school when a chest of drawers in the library fell on him and broke his hip. And he'd been taken to the hospital by the Royal Helicopter Angel of Mercy ambulance. And Maureen had just become the president of this service. And while driving home after visiting her son in the hospital, on the 5th of July 1972, she called at her mother's home for a cup of tea and a bit of a chat. And she left there about 9:15 p.m, taking a shortcut along the Muraduck home from Frankston. And that's the south side of Melbourne. I don't know how many of you know that area. It's quite an open area, it's sort of semi-country. And while driving home, on this occasion she saw a blue light which came down over the car. And she thought it was the helicopter because they have a blue light that blinks on the underside of it. And thinking that the helicopter might have a message for her, she got out of the car and had a look at it. And she was really quite staggered because it was a huge object. It would have spanned the road, that's the macadam strip, plus the two side pieces on the road, which would have made it an extremely large saucer, which would be about, the object was possibly, in her estimation, but 2 telephone poles high, and would have spanned the strip of road, which was 24 feet wide, also taking in the nature strips on the either side of the road, and making the saucer approximately 100 feet in diameter. Now, having already alighted from the car, she leaned back and took a long look at the object and wondered what it was that she was seeing. The object's surface was smooth, it had no joins, or welds, seams, or rivets, no windows or portholes, and no wheels. The huge object was radiating a brilliant light, or blue light, and an intense glow, and there was no movement, no wobbling, no rotating, but a faint humming could be heard. And she noted all these things while wondering what sort of aircraft it was before fear took over, at which time she quickly got back into the car and drove off as fast as she could, only to find the object was maintaining its speed just above and behind the car. No matter how fast she travelled, the object seemed to remain at the same distance. Aware that the blue light was no longer with her, and seeing a very bright light streak off in the opposite direction, Mrs. Puddy realised that the chase must have been over, and it followed her for about 8 minutes, or 8 miles rather. She didn't go a mile a minute, but 8 miles. The witness reported her sighting to the police at Dramana, and some family members and also some friends who considered it all a bit of a joke. So she decided to do a little bit more about it, but not until about 3 weeks later. Then on the 25th of July, in that same year, after having visited her son again, who was there in hospital for some time, she followed a similar route home, had a cup of tea with her mother, and left again about the same time, 9:15. She arrived at the Murdoch Road, travelled a short distance of about 1 mile when the blue light once again appeared before her. And she said, "Oh no, not again. And this time I'm not going to stop." And she was hanging onto the steering wheel and nothing was going to move from that car. And the car drifted to a stop on the side of the road. No matter what she did to the holding car, it wouldn't reply to her demands. She was wondering, where do I go from here? She was rather terrified and gripped the wheel and looked out the windscreen and saw the object hanging silently in the above the car, and just in front of it and above the car. And the countryside was bathed in a blue light. Then a voice spoke to her. Not audibly, she said, but in her head, as if it was a thought put into the head. And as if words had been put into the computer, it came out the other end in the most beautifully modulated and very well-spoken English. And during this time, she experienced the most unusual sensation. She said if you could feel that you'd been in a vacuum, that was the impression that she got. It was perfectly still, perfectly quiet. And the message read, "Don't be afraid." There's a pause. "We mean you no harm," another pause. "Your tests will be negative." And she already had some done and they were negative, but she thought they couldn't have been the ones. "Tell the media," and a longer pause, "and you are now in control." And at that moment the car started up again as if she had turned the key. Now she didn't touch the key at all, she just sat there, she was stunned. So that the car started up because she hadn't turned it off. They had apparently. And she stopped at the same police station to find it closed. Then she went on to the next one, still on her way home. And she told the police officer that, "I want to report a sighting of a flying saucer." "Oh yes, madam, yes," came the reply. And she insisted in fear and frustration. So the policeman humoured her and had it recorded. The next morning she phoned Laverton RAAF station and asked if they could offer any explanation of what she'd seen, to which they replied that it couldn't have been an aircraft or a balloon, as neither would have been in the area at the time, but didn't say as it could cause panic, anything that could cause panic. They would send her a questionnaire to complete, but when asked about this later, she said you'd have to have been an astronaut to have understood it, and I believe she didn't bother to return it. But Paul and I were invited to go through the Air Force files, and we discovered that she obviously had returned it at a later date. Must have thought much better of it. Naturally, we questioned Maureen regarding her experience in the car, and what did the messages mean? She said she'd not had any recent tests, but she'd had some about 6 months before, and they had proved negative. There was no use telling her not to be afraid because she was terrified. As for telling the media, she phoned 3 or 4 TV stations, and one was mildly interested, and they were showing chariots of the gods at the time, and 2 made light of the news, and she didn't bother to contact the 3rd one or the 4th one. And I heard through a radio talkback program, which in desperation she had contacted because the UFO nuts had said to contact the media, and she was not wanting to see them again. UFO Norks I meant, not UFO nuts. We're the UFO nuts. And at this stage I had not actually met Maureen. That was the night, the day I spoke to her on the telephone, and only spoken to her for 1 hour. But when I invited her to address one of our meetings, we had the National Mutual Theatrette at the time, a delightful little theatrette, and she agreed to do this, and we sat her down the front where she couldn't see all the people coming in, and I said, well, you'll be comfortable there and you won't see anybody. So when she got up to speak, she was staggered at the number of people that were filling the hall and outside into the lobby. But that hall was crowded, and it was very, very quiet, right through the whole hour of her talk. And even the people outside who were standing were perfectly quiet. Everybody was thoroughly fascinated. During the period, the question period that time, Maureen was put through her paces. She did think that what she saw was a psychic phenomenon. And did she suffer any burns or after effects? To both these questions, the first one was, did she think it was a psychic phenomenon? And to both the questions, she answered no. Did she think there were any other witnesses? She thought there must have been one at least, because as she was approaching the railway crossing, she saw a man with a torch leading a car across the railroad, and surely the UFO must have passed it over him. But would have been going in the same direction, so he may not have seen it. Later the man's wife contacted her, and also another lady living on the ridge, the range ridge there, who'd seen a light coming across the road. Both had seen this. The third experience was purely a psychic experience, and this happened about 6 months later. It was one Wednesday evening. I'd received a phone call from a rather agitated Maureen, who said she'd been trying to contact 2 other representatives. Probably a good thing that she couldn't contact them, because she may have had to have gone public, and I don't think she really wanted that. She was quite happy to speak at our meeting, but not to go public in media or publications. For some days she'd been hearing a voice calling to her, Maureen, return to the meeting place. And it didn't matter where she went, she could hear this voice. She heard it at the front door, and she went to answer the door, and the husband said, who was that? But the husband was in a wheelchair at this stage. He was an invalid and had been for some time. And she said there was nobody there. She went up shopping and turned around to hear somebody who'd been saying, Maureen, return to the meeting place. And this was getting on her nerves a bit. I think she was getting a little bit worried as she was going shopping that day. And she felt that she had to go to the meeting place and was too scared to go alone. So when she rang my number, I told Paul, and off we both trotted that night. We took our supper with us and went off in his car down to meet Maureen at the meeting place. We said we'd wait to see her at an electrical substation, which was right opposite where we were going to be. And she came along about 8:30 and rather agitatedly dashed over from her car to ours. And we were there, really quite early. It was still, I think, only just light. And she came over, rushing over and saying, I really went off the road back there. And I said, well, I suggest you tell us all about it when we drive to the meeting place. So she said that there was, before going further, I should perhaps add that as I entered her car to go away to the meeting place, I had an odd feeling when I touched the electrical experience when I touched the door of her car. And I got a sort of an electric shock, which probably wouldn't have been unusual for me because I thought maybe being somewhere near the substation, it might have had an effect on the car, and touching the metal handle might have had an effect of a slightly electric shock on myself. However, I got into the car and I said, she told me that there was a little man sitting there when she turned around the corner up there, and I said, is he still there? And I thought, well, if he is, I'm sitting on him. And she said, no, he went when I got out of the car, when she got out of the car. And I said, what did he look like? And sorry. And she was really quite shocked at this. And he got out of the car. He was like a little man, she said, but in a tinsel type suit. He was silvery, and he was described as sitting exactly where I was, which was quite close to her in the middle of the seat, because I thought Paul was going to come in with us, and I'd moved in. But he wasn't there, and I couldn't visualise it. I had no idea. I mean, I might have a very good imagination at times, but it didn't run to that extent. And when we got back to the meeting place, it was a little drive off among some trees. Paul got into the back of her car, and I was sitting in the front with her still. And we were talking about the latest incident when she grabbed my arm and shook me. And she pointed across and she said, there he is. Can't you see him? Can't you see him? And she's sitting there shaking me like there. And I tried to explain to her that it was possibly like closed circuit television from them to her. And she said he was coming closer to the car. In fact, he was so close that had I put my arm out, I could possibly touch him. And I was edging closer to her because she said that he wanted to get out of the car. And I said, well, come on, I'll come with you. And she wasn't going to get out anywhere. She was hanging onto that steering wheel. She wasn't going to move. So we asked Paul if he would get out of the car, brave Paul, and walk around the car to see what the entity would do. And he did. He was brave enough to do it. And I said to Maureen, what's the entity doing, Maureen? And she said, he's taken a step back to let Paul get between the car and himself. So then she adamantly declared she still wasn't going to get out of it. So I still trying to gently ease her out of the car. Anyway, the entity then became impatient and he started to walk away or move away and disappeared behind some thin bushes there. And she suddenly commenced describing the interior of the object. She said, oh, I'm inside the object. And I said, well, what's it like? And she told us that the entity had been standing there pointing to a large mushroom-like thing, like object in the centre of the circular room. It was a huge circular room, she said. Couldn't see any doors or windows or anything. The centre object, which was taller than an average person, was lit like a jelly. She said the first part was a bit like a clock, you know, with the Roman numerals all the way around it. And there was another part of it, interior part, which seemed to be moving like a jelly. So I asked her if it was like a gyroscope. And she said, what's a gyroscope? Well, we'd asked her that later on, and she had no idea what a gyroscope was, so we went on with this. She said there were like Roman numerals. Apparently, looking around the room, she became very agitated, started to cry, and I put my arm around her shoulder. And she said, I can't get out, I can't get out. There are no doors or windows. I can't get out. And that was her great fear at the time. She was in this UFO and couldn't get out. She didn't realise she was still sitting there with me. And she was really upset, and I clearly visualised what she was telling us. as if there was a picture in front of us. I knew exactly what she was describing. She said the little man was standing there pointing to this object, and she was watching and didn't take her eyes off it. So I decided, because she was so upset and agitated, that I was getting a bit concerned about it, because I could feel her tears falling down onto my hand, which was around her shoulders. And I directed my thoughts to them, and I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. And I thought, well, you know, I'm fearful for her state of health. If you can help her, please do. And you got her into this state, so get her out of it. And I felt she might have had a nervous breakdown or a stroke or something. She was just so upset. And anyway, she said they wanted her to close her eyes. And I said, well, go ahead. And she said, no, I'm not going to close my eyes. And you know, when you blink, you have no idea of blinking because you do it so naturally. So she obviously blinked, and then I could feel her relax. And she must have gone out into a sort of a trance or coma or whatever you like to call it. And then she began again to describe the interior of the object, and she still could see no way out, and she was still upset. And after a brief period, she sort of came back to us. She relaxed and she said, oh, I'm back again. And I said to Paul, well, let's have this cup of tea. We had a cup of tea with us, and we'll discuss it further and see what else we can make out of this, and see what she can get, see if Maureen can remember anything extra. So we put the lights on, we got the thermos flask out, handed Maureen a cup of tea, and she's all of a sudden, even with a cup of tea in her hand, she said, oh, I'm back in there again. And she started describing it again, and repeated the whole description all over again. And after a little while, she said more calmly, he's gone. And he's gone this time. I said, how do you know he's gone? She said, the feeling's different. It's gone completely. He's gone. It feels different. So now she came back to normal again. And everything seemed quite normal, so we went on with our supper and discussing the mushroom. And I was trying to identify it because she wasn't very technically minded. And I asked if it was like a gyroscope, but Maureen was apparently unfamiliar with that term. I'd only come into met the term because I was working with an airline, and they took us through all the area where they used to do up the aircraft and go over all these things. So I knew what it was, and she picked up a little gadget off the dashboard and said, would this be like it? And to my astonishment, it was one of those tiny little compasses that people had stuck on their dashboard, and she said that was almost identical to the mushroom that she'd been viewing, and it sticks on this little one sticks on the dashboard, you know, with a suction cup. I hadn't seen one before, and I haven't seen one since. But we didn't let her drive home alone, and she didn't wish to go either on her own because she was afraid that they might come back again. And she didn't want another visit from her friends, so-called, or the nerves on the part of the drive. She thought she might have had an accident or something. So I drove in her car and Paul followed us, and we went further down the line, further away from home. And I believe at this time it was about 10:30 or 11 o'clock when we got down to her home. We didn't really take that much notice of the time, but it was about that time. And of course the events went through the air again. Her husband was there, and we made a cup of tea and sat and discussed it again. And was I able to communicate with the entity when he said to close her eyes? Did I really communicate with them? Did they receive my thoughts regarding her agitated state? This is just our own thoughts after this. If so, what thoughts can they receive for more important and delicate situations than that particular one? Can they transmit to us? Can we transmit to them? I do believe that as science has gone on, and since those years, of course, naturally, we can communicate a lot more easily with in so many various ways. And I thought perhaps at this stage that, have you ever watched a hypnotist on a stage, you know, at work when they get a whole lot of people there? They can either, I can't hypnotise you, or come on, I can hypnotise you, and they get up there and they put them under, as we say. And when I snap my fingers, you will go into a deeper trance, or you will come out of it, or you'll do such and such a thing. Was this second or third case the time when they snapped their fingers at Maureen Putty and she went along and went into this so-called trance and visualised the inside of this object? Was the second meeting of that such case in her car just prior to speaking to her, was that the time when they perhaps snapped their fingers then? But if you could be in a vacuum, then I've been in one, such an incident. There was no sound, there was no movement, all was calm and quiet. Then the voice delivered the message. Was the third incident due to the snapping of the fingers when they urged her to act? If this is so, how many people can they hypnotise? I'll put it that way. Perhaps in their sleep, so we react when they wish us to, or whenever they snap their fingers. I find this a very sobering thought. Perhaps some of the abductions are the result of this snapping of the fingers by them. Thank you for your attention.
Lights up, please. Our next speaker is well known to all of us here in the Australian UFO community, especially here in New South Wales. He's known for speaking his mind even when we don't want to hear what must be said. Consider this quote from his article in the most recent issue of the UFO Reporter magazine that's available back there at the bookstall. The way UFO investigators go about their research has to change radically. The self-censorship practiced by many UFO groups on their own researchers as to what is an acceptable research direction has severely limited our work. We need to be more accommodating of diverse opinions. We should work openly and as a team. We need to look at all the data fellow researchers can produce for the critical information that we seek. He has been active in UFO organizations since 1973. He served as president of the Australian Centre for UFO Studies from 1985 to 1990. He is also one of the founders of UFO Research New South Wales in 1991, along with Brian Dickinson and Moria McGee, and served as president of this group until just last year. You could say that right now he's taking a bit of a breather, but let me ask you, just how do you let go of the tail of a tiger? Please welcome Paul Soliak.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take it easy. Well, it's a pleasure to be here as part of this conscious sharing. And I think we'll all agree that this has been a great success and great conference. It's been a sharing of information nationally. There are three types of ufologists. There's the investigator, there's the researcher, and there's the theorist. I fall into the third category, which is the theorist side. Ufologists are extraordinary people, unravelling the mysteries of the extraordinary world we live. I'm proud to be part of this awakening of the human mind with my colleagues here before you today as a panel of experts dwelling into the consciousness of man. What is real and what is not? Hasna Dia Yon wrote, Tales of Power, and we perceivers of the world, but the world we perceive is an illusion created by the description given to us at birth. And we maintain this illusion through reason and talk. So when we talk about ufology, we're talking about mystic or mysterious part of our being. And I think it needs to be understood. As a UFO theorist, I've been investigating the phenomenon for the last 23 years and only recently begun to start putting the pieces together to get a greater understanding of the subject. My earlier conference paper last year examined the postulation the human race was created by an alien race. This was confirmed by Lytton Newton Howe in her book Alien Harvest, suggesting that we are abducted for genetic material along with cattle. Today I will speak about classes of aliens coexisting with human race in terms of origins, mannerisms and behaviour. before I start, I'll just say that I've had competing needs for my time in the last week. I'm going on holidays on Monday, and unfortunately I backed the camper van into a big wall, and I've had to do a few repairs. Okay, where does one, and also chase that blue last night just sleeping down as well. And this is straight off the printed about half an hour ago. Where does one start to rediscover the information about alien influences here on Earth? Human history is full of 3, 4, 5 and 6-fingered giants and dwarf people. The Bible is a great history book of such matters. In Genesis 6:4, in those days when the sons of God had intercourse with daughters of men and had children by them, the Nephilim were on earth. They were heroes of old, men of renown. In Hebrew, giant translates as Rephael. Rephael is the plural, Rephailism, of uncertain etymology. They were tall, large-framed, powerful. They lived southwest of Jerusalem, Jehoshaphat. Various ufologists have tried to classify aliens in lines of classification. I'd like to go to that second overhead. Okay, classification of aliens. What they've done is they've looked at it and they said, okay, we're looking at the degree of strangeness. And they try to look at the physical appearance. Some people looked at the actual clothing they wear and classify them by their clothing. Obviously, the ideal way would be to find out where they came from, classify them by their origin. But that seems a little bit difficult because we're being abducted, not they're being abducted by us. Okay, McCall, John D. Hebra and Alvin Lawson in 1977 derived a group or categories of aliens. Human, then you've got your humanoid, basic bipedal shape, head, 2 arms, 2 legs. Then you've got your animal. Then you've got your robot. Then you've got your exotic. And then you've got your apparitions. Interesting classification. We'll go to that overhead view. In this next overhead, we've looked at another study that looked at the various types of aliens that have been picked up, and they all seem to have some basic characteristics. You can see from there, what are they? They're all bipedal. In other words, they've got 2 arms, 2 legs and a head. The humanoid in structure. And our evolutionists suggest that as a consequence of evolution, the eyes come forward, the brain is fairly close to the eyes, and for mobility and dexterity we need arms and we need legs. So that seems to be maybe universal form. Okay, next overhead please. Thanks, Hugh. Okay, MacDonald also looked at the classification system and came up with this scenario. And what we're looking at here is we've got a grey, we've got the Roswell figures, we've got neonate, which is basically infant humanoid shape. So we've got the Nordic group, then we've got the reptilian, and then we've got hybrid, which is a cross between us and them. Now, when you look at all that, it doesn't seem to make a great deal of sense, and it seems to be a little bit all over the place. But basically it's bipedal, you've got a head, 2 arms and a leg, it's very common. I postulate to combine the groups based on functions and alien strata derived from abduction experiences. Go to slide 6, right through that section. Okay, my classification, I'm looking at the first class being animal, and the chupacabras of Puerto Rico would be one that would fit into that category. It was described as large, wet, black, hairy gorilla-like, that 5 foot tall. Sound like an animal to you? Okay. In Babylonian times, you had the Onus, which was a god, and it was basically a fish-tailed humanoid type of person, a god. And in Africa, you looked at the Dogon, from the Dogon group in Africa, the Dogon tribe, fish-tailed. Okay, that's the animal classification. The next group I think we should classify as would be humanoids. And these would include reptilians, and the Nordics, and basically the ones that were fairly similar to basically just the humanoid shape, that seem to exhibit sort of human or vulnerable characteristics. The next group, well, I considered important, was the human hybrid clones, and the Nordics, would fall into this group. Hybrid clones settle, supervise abductions, and take up functions perhaps like psychologists and social workers on board their ships, based on some of the information from the abduction experience. That's sort of abduction scenario. Just keep it going to those. That group. You would end it. Okay, the next group. So after groups, humanoids are broken down into two groups: humanoids, which is basic, and hybrid clones, which is the Nordic group. So we've got one animal, two humanoids, three. Now the third classical group would be the androids. And the greys would fit into this sort of classification. And we're looking at beehive control, short-term memory, basic function type units, in other words, robots. And the fourth category is apparitions, a holographic projections. And an example of this would be aliens that have been observed that can't be totally visibly identified or seen, that have a wispy nature about them, that probably don't exhibit any feet. Okay, so the fetal mode of movement is not clear. That's the suggestion that I'm looking at. So there's four classifications. You've got animals, you've got humanoids. It's broken down into hybrids and clones, and then you've got the androids or robots, and you've got the apparitions. So you've got basically four groups based on what they're on about. What I might do is now go into some of those groups a little bit. So we're looking at the animal class, where we can look at the chupacabras, blood-sucking vampires, creatures from Puerto Rico, Mexico, and South United States of America. They're kin animals and attack humans. The chupacabras is a Spanish word meaning chupa, which is to suck, cabras, which is goats. So they're basically goat suckers. Well, that's the description from the native nationals living in those areas. They're described as having 3 toes, 3 fingers, with 50mm long fingernails, and they smell like wet dogs that have been in the sewer. They have small pointed ears, they're thin, patchy spotted hair, and shades of grey and oranges. I suppose you'd all like to meet one of those. On the 11th of March 1995, just more or less recently, at the town of Algeciras, in the centre of an island, Puerto Rico, Ewine Brito Hermendes found 8 of his sheep dead with 3 strange puncture holes in their chest. And there's been reports of human attacks more recently. Okay, the second group, which is class 2. Can we go to slide 17, please? Majestic has come to the fore with Stanton Friedman and others as being a reliable document and evidence that the United States Air Force were doing covert UFO tactical surveillance and retrievals relating to UFO events. Now, they've classified in their manual, and that's a page from the front of their manual, 2 types of extraterrestrials. And I would put these into the human class, which is category 2. First one is EBE type 1. And they're humanoids similar to humans in appearance and could be mistaken for Oriental person. 5'5" to 5'4" in height, weighing 80 to 100 pounds. Similar to human, with slightly larger, a more rounded cranium. The skin is pale, chalky yellow in colour, thick, slightly pebbled in appearance. The eyes are small, wide set, almond shaped, with brown-black iris with very large pupils. The whites of the eyes are not like that of humans, but have pale grey calves. The ears are small and not low in the skull. The nose is thin and long, and the mouth wider than humans, nearly lipless. There is no facial hair or very little body hair, that being very fine and confined to the underarms and groin area. The body is thin without apparent body fat, but muscles are well developed. The hands are small, 4 long digits, but no opposing thumb. The outside digit is joined in a manner as to be almost nearly opposable. There is no webbing between the fingers as in humans, and the legs are slightly but noticeably bowed, and the feet are somewhat splayed and proportionally large. That's type 1. Type 2, the Air Force classification under Majestic, is that these entities are human but different from type 1. They are bipedal, 3'5", 4'2" in height, and weigh 25 to 30 pounds. The head is much larger than human or type 1. The cranium is much larger and elongated. The eyes are very large, slanted, and nearly wrapped around the side of the skull. They are black with no whites showing. There's no noticeable brow bridge, and the skull has a sleek peak that runs over the crown. The nose consists of 2 small slits, with slits high above the slit-like mouth. There are no external ears. The skin is a pale bluish-grey colour, the being somewhat darker on the back of the creature. It's very smooth and fine cell. There's no hair, no facial body hair, and the creature does not appear to be mammalian, feeding young with breast milk. The arms are long in proportion to the legs, and the hands have 3 long tapered fingers and a thumb that is nearly as long as the fingers. The second finger thicker than others, but not as long as the index finger. The feet are small and narrow, and the 4 toes are joined together with a membrane. Majestic points out that these 2 types of creatures may have originated from different planets. They're fairly substantial classification of people who are occupants of UFOs or associated with UFO activity, and they're fairly significant comments on the different classes. We obviously haven't seen them to do autopsies on, but we are dealing with eyewitness reports. It starts to mirror some of that information there to suggest that it's correct. The third type of second subclass of humanoid I mentioned earlier was the Nordic tall blondes. They're about 6 to 7 feet tall, handsome, blonde shoulders, length hair, with blue eyes, kind and loving. And this information is coming from abductees. People have been abducted onto flying saucers, and these are their stories. Now, they may not be totally correct, but in essence, they must be getting roughly around the right information. And the consistency between reports, so we're starting to build some pictures. He is parental, watchful, smiling and affectionate, beautiful, all-knowing, and wears tight-fitting uniform, a guardian angel. Usually seen with small greys. They have vivid blue eyes and seem to look alike. The small beings mentioned before, the skin is reported to be soft and porous, with rubbery or plastic feel to it. The tall being's skin is rough and more leathery. Neither type of being has hair, muscular skeletal, and distinguishing marks like warts or moles. Discoloration not seen. Abductees describe alien skin colour in varying shades of grey, from dark grey to chalk white. Tall beings have an air and authority about them. Maybe they represent some sort of hierarchy within aliens, such as a doctor or psychologist on board these ships. The small beings appear to be controlled by them. Okay, the next group, which are the androids. Now, the most typical android, I believe, that is seen by abductees is the grey. I don't believe the grey is a humanoid. I believe it is a part robot, part animal type android, is the word I'm looking for. And if you look at the behaviour of them, they never run, they never get excited, they're very cool, they just do their job and their functions, and when things get into trouble, or there's a problem, a taller being comes in and controls the situation, as we saw with Clay Cargill. Number 18, please. Okay. And other examples would be the Hopkins-Kelly sighting, where we saw this sort of frog-like humanoid with the big ears. Now that was reported as being silvery, so it's probably a robot. And Pascagoula is also an unusual shaped one. You go to number 19, please. We're looking at aspirations or holographic projections. We're looking at different groups. We're looking at them disappearing from view, not as walking or being beamed up, but actually decreasing or dematerialising. So that's that group there. Obviously, we can go into a lot more history about where they come from and what they're doing, but we don't have time to deal with that today. I will be writing a book on this particular subject, and we should be out in the next 12 months, so you can hold me to that. And we'll be looking at these particular issues a bit more carefully. So in conclusion, I'd just like to make a comment about Paddy Barton's statements and paper yesterday. The Copernican Revolution was 1543, where man moved away from his concept of the centre of the universe. I don't want to move backwards towards a centralised universe where we think we're the centre of the universe. Holograms exist. It's the composite of intellectual life manifestations of the universe, not just planet Earth and humanoids. The Earth is being visited and coexisting with aliens ever since time began. Human awareness in 1990 has finally realised their presence. Where they be extra or intraterrestrial or dimensional beings, we are not alone. May the force be with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Paul. Our next speaker will continue where this film ended by expanding on the relevance of channeled information to UFO research. He has been active in Queensland UFO organizations since the late 60s. He is currently the administrator for Australia's only, and to my understanding, true national UFO organization, ACUFOS. His vision is to somehow make this ACUFOS a part of all existing UFO groups in this country now, in order to maintain, protect, and make available all the UFO research and records gathered to everyone concerned. A kind of free national UFO database, if you will. This vision is yet to be realized. How can he not have our support? Please welcome Martin Gottschalk.
I think what I'm going to speak about today is really more in the field of the philosophy of UFO research. That is to say, when we step back and look at all the things we've been trying to do and ask ourselves, are we going about this in the best possible way? And we step back and say, while we've been busy accusing of the rest of the world of denying the facts and ignoring the facts and not seeing the inferences and implications, do we not sometimes do the same thing ourselves? For after all, we're part of the same community and we share the same shortcomings as the people whose shortcomings we see so very clearly. And so it is that in conferences and gatherings like this one, channeled material and the accounts of contactees tend not to get too much attention. I think part of the stated reason for this is it's too way out for the other side of the society that we want to attract, the scientists and the general run of the public that we want to get our messages out to. We don't dare to be that way out. But I think there's also an unspoken agenda too. It hurts to stretch the mind that far. It opens chasms and fears and uncertainties, and we are human beings as well as researchers, and we're subject to our failings as well. So I hope that in addressing this topic of channeled material, I can both myself and all of us help all of us to see a little more clearly why we've taken our particular stance in UFO research and how perhaps we might improve on it. I'm not here to tell you that channeled material is true or real or accurate. That is not, I think, for a UFO researcher to determine. We have our own questions to answer, as I'll point out. So what is channeled material? What is channeling? It's one aspect of a broader category of information, sometimes called received information, in which an individual somehow switches off their consciousness to such a degree that another consciousness allegedly is able to communicate through the communication equipment of that person, be it automatic writing or the voice faculties of that individual. That's the theory of channeling. And I'm not here to tell you that this is true or not true. It's not really quite relevant to my concern here. But I think that's a fair definition of what channeling is understood to be. A classical case is of a person who is confronted by a group of people like this one and sits down in a chair and makes a few jerky movements and a few other sounds and then appears to be in a different state of consciousness. When questions are put, the answers coming claim to be from a different consciousness than that of the person sitting there. And often, I think many people accept that as being the fact that those answers are really coming from a different intelligence than the one associated with the individual whom they see. That's channeled material. I looked at channeled material quite carefully about 20 or 25 years ago. As I think all of us do at one point or another, we look at everything to see what might be learned from it. And my finding about it were roughly that there is an enormous amount of material of this kind around. You can get it by the bookload. I have that much shelving of it, and I didn't even try to collect it all. I just looked at some. And some of it, to me, was very profound. A small portion of the channeled material is what I would call of a high quality. The ideas are profound, the motivation of the source seems to be of a high moral order, etc. The attention to detail, the attention to truth seems to be genuine, so I would call that of a high quality. The bulk of channeled material, in my finding, tended to be recycled, that is to say, a repetition of something which you could find in print somewhere else from an earlier time. When channeled information makes predictions, those predictions are just as bad as predictions made by almost everyone else. They usually fail at the critical time. And we've had examples of this just in the last couple of years. So the ability to make predictions that are fulfilled by subsequent historical experience doesn't establish channeling as accurate or reliable to a large degree, no more so than most other forms of prediction. But typically, a channeled body of material has a well-defined worldview. It paints a clear picture. Forget for the moment if that picture is true or false, real or not, it's clear. I don't think if I were the channeler here speaking to you, I'd hold your attention for very long if I couldn't project a well-defined story of some kind, give you a clear worldview of some kind. And I want to draw on this latter feature most especially when I look at how channeled material might be applied in UFO research. Before doing so, I'd like to briefly give what I think is a good definition of what UFO research is. I think it's fair to say that most UFO researchers take the view that the UFO phenomenon is at least to some extent physically real, has a physical reality to it. Too many people have bumped into them and kicked them and been bumped by these things, either the UFOs or its occupants, for that not to be a reasonable premise. That does not mean, of course, that they are only real in the sense that we understand physical reality. We're simply saying that whatever else they may be, they also can behave like physically real objects, and therefore the methods of research that have worked well for us in studying other physically real things like nature and the physical world have a relevance to UFO research. And I think in any research practice, it is very important to distinguish facts from inferences. We need both to understand a phenomenon. What we tend to do, and the thing that we always have to guard against doing, is to judge what can be fact by whether or not it agrees with what we think the world is like, our inferences. I think the early history of UFO research came up very hard against this particular problem. When UFOs displayed the physical characteristics they did, the apparent weightlessness, the tremendous changes in speed and direction at very high inferred accelerations, the first reaction of the most qualified people was, this is physically impossible, therefore that can't be a true factual statement. It doesn't fit my theories, so it can't be a fact. We're still probably up against that to a large degree, although perhaps less so than before. So as UFO researchers, we have to guard carefully against judging facts by our theories or our beliefs about what is real or true. We have to have a methodology for letting facts speak for themselves, for deciding what is a fact on the merits of the factual side of it, while our theoretical thinking is switched off for the time being. And then when we've done that, then we try to assimilate the facts into some kind of a conceptual framework by a process which no longer is worried about whether facts are facts or not, but accepts them for a moment as facts and says, well, what sense can I make of it? So we do this, just like we have 2 feet, and we stand on one while we take a step with the other, then we put that one down and stand on it while we take a step with the next one. Rather so do we do the fact gathering and the interpreting stepwise. And when we're doing one, we're not doing the other. And if we try to do the 2 together, we'll trip and fall. It's a bit like that with UFO research as well. So that's the kind of thing I think we all do in one way or another. And that in fact is essentially what is called the scientific method, or shall we put it the other way around. As science became established and grew, scientists adopted this method, which existed before science ever had a name, as a good way of studying the natural world. And I don't think there's any arguments about that. It is a proven method. It works quite well if we do it the right way. Okay, well that's UFO research as I understand it. And now I can address the question of what can we do, or what can we use channeled material for in furthering our attempts to understand the UFO phenomenon. And in this respect, I think it's fair to say that channeled material does not contribute very much of a factual kind. There isn't much of a factual kind in the channeled body of information. Some that there is may be difficult to establish factually. If there is, we apply the normal rules of factual analysis to it, let the facts stand on their own. If they come out of that test okay, we'll take it as fact. We don't have that much of it. What we have in the channeled body of material is a lot of ideas and concepts and belief systems. And just because they're that kind of stuff, there's no reason to ignore them, because we need ideas and concepts and belief systems in order to make sense of the body of facts that we have associated with the UFO phenomenon by a careful process of assessment, categorizing, truth finding, and so on. But they're just a great big pile of facts until we make sense of them, and we need a conceptual framework with ideas, notions, theories, and so on, with which to order them into something that might be an explanation of the things we don't know. We're trying to go from the things we know as facts to the things we don't know by this process of influence. And then we think we've made some sort of progress. We say we have developed some kind of understanding of this phenomenon. Okay, so it is in the field of ideas and concepts that channeled material can be the most helpful. And I would like to illustrate this by making reference to a particular sample of channeled material. You've been looking here at this picture. It was published in something called The Voice of Universarius, which I received. I became a subscriber to that publication. It was produced in the United States between the early 1970s and through most of the 70s. And I also obtained some back copies of their publication because I was keen to complete my collection of what they were printing. This picture refers to Clarion. Clarion is a planet described by a contactee called Bertram Russell. His experience, to my knowledge, happened in the 50s, in the early or middle 50s. He was working with the road gang, building roads in the western desert of the United States. I forget the exact place right now. During the hot days, a lot of the work, especially maintenance work, was done at night. So he would work maintaining the vehicles and machinery, and when he had what was a lunch break at midnight or thereabouts, he'd drive off into the desert to have his lunch, in inverted commas. And on these occasions, he saw a large object land, he saw little beings come out of it. He had a repeated series of such sightings and encounters with the occupants, and became quite friendly with the lady captain that drove this thing. They were smallish type beings, who said she came from a planet called Clarion, which was beyond the moon. That's the only description she gave of it, and was a place we couldn't see with our telescopes. I believe that's what the word Clarion here refers to. And those of you who have read Alec Newell's recent book called Co-Evolution may recognize a faint similarity between the diagrams in his book and the artwork in this picture. Has anyone read that book of Newell's? Anyone here? One, there's a few. Do you notice a similarity with the structures he shows on this world that he says he went to, and some of the images here? I certainly picked it up, and I thought you might be interested to see it. Now, this thing was published in 1978. The channeled message that I'm going to use as reference, if I may have the next slide please, was first produced, or the claimed dating of it is 1967. I'll give you the date here. The communication was given in March 1967 to a person called Marian Hartill, and the claimed source of this communication was Myron of the Ashtar Command. Now, you've all heard of the Ashtar Command. Did you know that it was popular in the 1960s? If you didn't, then you haven't realized how much recycled material you're getting in channel sources. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily false. If the Ashtar Command is real, it's probably been around for a long time. I'm not concerned here to evaluate the truth or not of channeled material, but just to look at it. So the Ashtar Command's been around for a long time. Now, look at that. The title of this particular message is Guidelines of Space Contact. The guidelines of space contact are these. I've also included on that page the source from which I got it. Notice it's The Voice of Universarius. The person editing and publishing it was an elderly gentleman called Zelram Carlsley, whom I met in 1980 in Portland, Oregon. This particular issue was number 17 of October, volume 17 of October 1978. And notice that they've been going for 17 years at that point. Number 10, of course, is for the 10th month. These are monthly issues. I don't have time to go through all of them in detail. I wish to make specific reference to paragraph number 6, which is on the next slide, please. Let's just look at that one. Paragraph number 6. The Earth is a battleground. The forces of evil employ ships of great size and beauty, just as do the Christ forces. Now, you may recall that in the 50s and 60s, the Space Brothers were all benevolent, wonderful, beautiful beings. In the 1990s, there are no Space Brothers of benevolent, wonderful inclination. They're all baddies, you know, which sort of swung from one extreme to the other. But in 1967, somebody was saying, there are both kinds. And you can't tell the difference by seeing how lovely the spaceships are. Number 2, unprepared Earthlings who seek contact must not do so without knowledge of how to set up a positive force field and hold it around themselves. In other words, don't just rush into a contact, protect yourself first. Is that bad advice in today's context? Next item. The negative forces can and do abduct thousands of people each year off the surface of the Earth, as well as animals, water and vegetation. Now, we knew a fair bit about that then. We know a lot more about it today. These samples are used for a hideous purpose. The source here didn't think that abductions, or what we today call the various genetically related procedures that seem to be associated with abductions, are necessary for a very nice purpose. And a lot of people today don't think so either, and I count myself as one of them. I have serious moral qualms about the whole thing. I don't think nice people do the sort of things that we learn about. Now, this was available in 1967. I don't think it's much out of date today. It's extremely up to date, I think. And it illustrates that we can profit by taking notice of some of the better quality channeled material. I'm not saying we should believe it or necessarily accept it as true. Just be aware of the ideas, because then when the facts come your way that those ideas might help you to make sense of, you'll take a lot less time to make the connection. That's the kind of thing I'm saying. That's the kind of use that I would suggest we make of channeled material. So we're not trying to decide if they're genuine or not, if the alleged source is real or not, if they have an ulterior motive or if they're honest or not. These are important questions. If channeling is the very center of your involvement and interest, these are issues that you have to deal with. If you're concerned with unraveling the UFO phenomenon and having a look at channeled information because it seems to be talking about the UFO phenomenon too, or for any reason at all, you're really using it as a source of ideas and concepts. Maybe somebody has thought of something you didn't think of. Or maybe somebody's trying to get a message through all the noise and is using this particular avenue for doing it. Maybe I and each of us have a particular mental block and one particular avenue of communication can get past it. I think that's probably where I can conveniently stop. The conclusions that we can draw from this are, as I've suggested, that we could profitably look at least the better quality scientific channeled material. And we can always remind ourselves that doing UFO research is like walking down the street. We gather facts, and we make sense of them. We gather more facts, we make more sense of them. And while some might specialize in one field and others specialize in the other field, we have to do both in order to gain our understanding, the understanding that we, I believe, are seeking for. Thank you very much.
For the delay, I'd like to present the next speaker to you. He's going to be giving us the real facts behind a case that, of course, is very well known to all of us here and actually to everyone around the world that studies these things. It's the case of a pilot that went missing in midair and was never seen or heard from again. Here to give you the real story behind young Frederick Valentic is a longtime UFO investigator. He continues his research as public relations officer for the Victorian UFO Research Society and also as a Victorian representative for MUFON. We thank him for coming all the way here to join us today and present this to you. Please welcome Paul Norman.
These
December 1959, the Inspector General of the U.S. Air Force issued a directive to the command stating that unidentified flying objects treated lightly by the press and referred to as flying saucers are serious business. And serious business indeed, because there have been many people who have lost their lives, and then the pursuit investigation of unidentified flying objects. Before I get on to the Valenti's case, I'd like to give you a couple examples. Kinross Air Force Base, November 1953. It was an unknown spotted from the air base at Kinross. They had one interceptor, and they scrambled that interceptor who vectored it into the proximity of the UFO. The Captain Felix Monclay and his witness, Lieutenant Wilson, described the object as a cigar shape spinning. As they moved closer to the object, first there was static and the communication failed altogether. And then there's the MiG jets at the listening station off Key West in February 1967. The listening station picked up the voices of two pilots out of Cuba flying MiG jets. The first pilot radioed the base back in Cuba that there was an unknown, a cigar-shaped object, and he was instructed to challenge for identification, which he did. Of course, no response. The next instruction came from Cuba was to fire on the object, which he did. When he fired on the object, the cigar shape just went a circle, come alongside. There was no cannon fire. The MiG jet disintegrated. What was going on was the pilot in the second crash was screaming back to the base in Havana. We don't know what happened to the second jet, but all of this case happened back years ago. In 1994, I went to the Key West and checked with some contacts who confirmed this. And just recently, Frederick Valenti's was the 20th case that we know about. We've always said there'd be an X number we didn't know about. But we found out about two more. I remember that became personally acquainted with an investigator who investigated wrecks for crashes for the U.S. Navy. But this was a case that he had investigated. It was a UFO case. And I hope that we can be able to tell you more about this case when the conference in October in Melbourne. We're not in the clear yet. We don't want to get anybody tail in the crack. Now, better next slide, please. During the evening of October 21st, 1979, 20-year-old Australian pilot Frederick Valenti disappeared over Bass Strait while flying from Melbourne's Moorabbin Airport to King Island off the coast of Victoria. He lost communication. His last communication occurred at 7:12 p.m. during the largest UFO flap in Australian history. Nearly 19 years after that fatal Saturday evening, no trace has ever been found of either the pilot or his blue and white Cessna Model 182 aircraft. During my travels and correspondence, I have found many false stories circulating around the world regarding this most important case. I have found that these inaccurate statements are coming from individuals at home and abroad. These are people who live thousands of kilometers from the scene where the action took place, newcomers to the field, and last but not least, professors of impossibility from the scientific community who have concocted preconceived opinions and have tried to make the facts fit around them. Frederick Valentius was not the only person who reported strange objects over and near Bass Strait that day and night. Researchers have found over 50 reported observations in that area which occurred before, during, and after his encounter. Most of this information would never have been found without the diligence of researchers from the Victorian UFO Research Society based at Moorabbin, near the location from whence this mysterious flight commenced. The Bass Strait flap had been building up for over 6 weeks prior to the pilot's disappearance. The UFO flap reached a peak that very weekend of October the 21st. Most daytime sightings were reported more that day and night than any flap period that we have ever investigated. Many of these reports have been published in the U4's publication, Australian UFO Bulletin, the Newfound UFO Journal, and International UFO Report, and other publications throughout the world. It is a confirmed fact that many UFOs were reported in the vicinity of King Island and the area around Bass Strait on that day and night. 2 months prior to that fateful event, we were receiving increasing telephone calls from individuals reporting strange light in the sky. About the same time, UFO reports were being passed on to the police and the King Island News. We were not aware of the reports occurring on this island until they were forwarded to us after news of the pilot's disappearance became known. On that same day and night, something strange was taking place in the Melbourne and Victorian skies as well as over Bass Strait. This is the inescapable conclusion from startling files of evidence compiled by individuals in the vicinity, in that vicinity. Documented interviews with people from unrelated locations up to 300 kilometers apart told similar stories of round objects, starfish-shaped objects, and silver cigar-shaped UFOs moving slowly in the sky, apparently with no visible means of propulsion and no sound. This is the lighthouse that he didn't pass over the lighthouse. He turned 6 kilometers this side of that lighthouse when he picked up this hitting part. And maybe we have witnesses who were vacationing along the Parker River who confirmed that is where he turned. The transcript position of the communication between Valentius and Melbourne Flight Service as released by the Australian Department of Transport Police. Next slide, please. This will give you an idea where he was. 706, Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. Is there any known air traffic below 5,000? Flight service, no known traffic. Federate. Seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000. Flight service. What type of aircraft is it? Federate. I cannot confirm. It is 4 right. It seems to me like landing lights. Flight service, Delta Sierra Juliet. Federate. The aircraft has just passed over me at least 1,000 feet above. Flight service. And it is a large aircraft, confirmed. Federate. Unknown, they were both getting uptight at this stage, sort of stuttering along. Unknown due to the speed it's traveling is that any aircraft in the vicinity. Flight service, no known aircraft in the vicinity. Frederick, it's approaching now from the due east toward me. Flight service, Delta Sierra Juliet. Open microphone for 2 seconds. Frederick, it seems to me that he's playing some sort of game. He's flying over me at 2-3 times the speeds I cannot identify. Flight service. Roger, what is your actual level? Frederick, my level is 4,545.00. Flight service. And you confirm you cannot identify the aircraft? Frederick, affirmative. Flight service. Roger, stand by. Frederick, it's not an aircraft, it is an open microphone for 2 seconds. Flight service, can you describe the Earth aircraft? Frederick, as it's flying past, it's a long shape, open microphone for 3 seconds. Cannot identify more than it has such speed, open microphone for 3 seconds. It's before me right now, Melvin. Flight service. Roger. And how large would the Earth object be? Frederick. Melvin, it seems that it is stationary. What I'm doing right now is orbiting. And the thing is just orbiting on top of me. It's a green light and sort of metallic light. It's all shining on the outside. At this stage, the object was orbiting with it. We did not know which direction he was orbiting, turning. We found later, which we'll come to at that time. Flight service, Delta Sierra Juliet. At 7:10, open microphone for 3 seconds. It's just Spanish. Flight service, Delta Sierra Juliet. Frederick, would you know what kind of aircraft does like? Is it a military aircraft? Flight service. Confirm her aircraft just finished? Frederick, say again. Flight service. Is the aircraft still with you? Frederick, open microphone for 2 seconds. Now approaching from the southwest. Flight service, Delta Sierra Juliet. Frederick, Delta Sierra Juliet. The engine is rough out of it. I've got it. It said at 23, 24, and the thing is faulty. This is a common characteristic of ignition systems when aircraft are near automobiles, aircraft, power lines, TVs and all. What are your intentions, Frederick? My are intentions to go to King Island. Melbourne, the strange light is hovering again, on top of me again. Open microphone for 2 seconds. It is hovering and it's not an aircraft. Flight service, Delta Sierra Juliet. At 7:12:28, Frederick, Melbourne, open microphone for 17 seconds. No official conclusion has been given for the strange sound which was heard that interrupted the last statement of the pilot. The Valentis counter is almost a carbon copy of an experience of a 4-man crew aboard an Army helicopter who encountered a frightening event on 18th October 1973. This was 5 years before the Valentis case. Captain Lawrence Cohen was flying near Mansfield, Ohio at 2,500 feet when a crew member notified the captain that an object was approaching on a collision course. Cohen then initiated a controlled descent to 1,700 feet. The UFO took up a position just ahead of the helicopter, which was flying at 100 knots. The pilot was amazed his helicopter was climbing even though his controls were in ascending position. At 3,500 feet, there was a bump when the helicopter broke loose, and we think this is because the rotor on top after he put the pressure on the control system. During this period, Cohen tried to contact airfields nearby, but both UHF and VHF frequency had failed. Cohen also reported that his compass was rotating slowly. I met him in 1981 at a conference in Cleveland, Ohio, and explained as his compass was just spinning slowly, electromagnetic effect again. The shape of the object was described as cigar, as long shape, and its maneuverability was identical to the one reported by Valentich. The instruments were later checked out in Cleveland and found to be satisfactory. In this case, Larry Cohen and his crew got back to tell about the experience Frederick Valentich did not. We know that to this stage it was an identical description of the object that Frederick was describing. While military and civilian aircraft searched the area over Bass Strait, U4's investigators concentrated their effort with the interviews of witnesses who had reported objects they had seen flying that same day and night. Some examples of reports follow. Names are in file with U4s. Curry Island, 2 p.m. The sky was clear except one large cloud directly overhead. Out of this cloud came an object similar to a huge golf ball, about the quarter size of the moon. The object was white or silver in color. It moved slowly to the west, toward the sea, in the direction from which it came, then returned the direction which it came. At that time, there was no wind. The cloud remained stationary. The UFO was the only object seen to be moving in the sky. No balloons are released at King Island on the weekend. Beginning less than 1 hour after the King Island UFO was seen, twin cigar-shaped objects were reported to be moving from west to east over Victoria, near Bass Strait. They were at least seen about 4:30 p.m., last seen rather, about 4:30 p.m., and when suddenly they changed color from silver to white, made a sweeping curve to the north and sped away. The movement of these objects was traced by interviewing witnesses scattered along the flight path until the objects sped away. The objects nearest to the UFOs were almost directly under the object, that is, the observers were almost directly beneath the objects. They described them to be about 3/4 the size of a Boeing 747 aircraft joined together with 2 silver beams. They were last seen over Bass Strait, and there's one area there in between Bass Strait, Cape Otway, that some lads had a possum up the tree. It's the only reason they saw it was they were watching the possum. At 6:45, just 21 minutes before Frederick Valentich radioed Melbourne Flight Service that he was encountering an unknown aircraft, Roy Manifold of Melbourne photographed a 35 millimeter film, an object hurling in a blur of speed and mist out of the water near Cape Otway Lighthouse. All modes of computer analysis were used to gain data, including edge enhancement, color and contouring, digiting rather. The analysis was made by GSW, that's the person there that was an engineer who worked for the aerospace industry. He had high technology equipment. William H. Spaulding was his name. The photos were also seen by other photo spacious. Next slide, please. You'll notice here the island, the reef rather, in the back. Nothing there. The next slide, please. In the fourth, you see something popping up and down here. And then the next slide, please. What you see here is it looks like a cloud here, but going in 20 seconds is going into the shot, 9 degrees into the shot, which meant it had to be going over 300 kilometers an hour. And publication of the photos brought professors of impossibility out of their armchairs for another debunking attempt. They decreed that the photos showed a cloud of puff of smoke. U4's advisor quickly exploded this hasty announcement. The object appears only in 2 of the 6 pictures. taken while the camera was in automatic sequence. Now, the next slide. I took these to the United States to be investigated. The age enhancement, it shows the picture, the disc at the top. This other is missed. And the next slide, please. This is an enlargement of the actual object itself. Now, this was not the same shape object that Valentius was describing. He was describing one of larger shape. This was the smaller one. And the second, next slide, please. You can see the drops, the other enhancement, the drops of water. You can back up on that other slide probably will proceed. Communication between Valentius and Melbourne Flight Service was reported from 7:06 to 7:12 p.m. before an unexplained sound abruptly terminated the voice communications. During that time, 20 people located in different areas around Bass Strait observed a green light in the same direction at the same time. The pilot was reported the approach and description of an object with a green light. In addition, other reports which have been forthcoming, such as the southern suburb of Frankston, a mother and 4 teenagers reported what appeared to resemble a skyrocket, although the object was stationary. The color appeared to be a mixture of red, pink, and white. The witnesses estimated the object to be a quarter the size of the moon. The mother said that at the time of the sighting, she did not realize it was a UFO until later when she learned that other people had seen a strange object. At the same time, the bank manager and his wife were driving on the highway near west of Melbourne, observed a starfish-shaped object out over Bass Strait. They noticed green flickering lights at the ends. The couple was of the opinion that it was the same object that Valentius was reporting before the strange sound jammed the radio transmission. Another sighting was reported from Ormond, the suburb of southern Melbourne, occurring at 7:15 p.m. when lights were noted in a cigar-shaped arrangement. The lights were described as was it?
Sorry, folks, we didn't realize they do that. They're turning it down now. It won't happen again. We'll continue here with Mr. Norman in just a moment. There we go. Sorry about that. Go ahead, sir. Come on now. Not everything's a conspiracy.
There were many other similar reports of flying objects throughout southern Victoria during that same day and night, and they continued for several days following this strange encounter. These reports were being referred to Viewforce on various sources. An outstanding sighting was reported on Monday evening. This